I'm good. How are you, sir?
I like the end cap too.
Okay. If you were at that conference, we may have met. Yes, I was there. Yeah, we've been in the same room, so. Okay, cool. Well, literally second week on third week. Planner type. So we'll have to teach you the handshake. Maybe get you the Dakota ring. As you were mentioning earlier in the conversation, I had a hard time getting her on board. Yeah, we were talking about it. I didn't realize it was welcome aboard. So, yes, I've been in the planning world for over 30 years. So. Three more people now. Well, anyway. Get myself situated. Okay, cool. Well, it's for the table. Oh, well, if you could sit up at the desk with Michael, since you need to be on the record, if we're out of chairs up there already.
And you could just sit right here.
Okay.
You could probably grab that one before somebody steals it. Or you could sit next to Renee. He's more fun than I am.
Never mind. Avena's chair. Wrong conjugation. Keys or the mouse button. Okay, cool. Okay. You have multiple options. Never mind. You can't do it. Because you don't want me to sit in the middle. I guess you can grab that chair and sit next to Harold. Yeah. How you doing, Mike? Usually over.
I stole your chair.
That means you get to be the chair of the meeting.
Oh, no.
There's no chair up here.
Dominic's bringing one.
We're working our way back.
Hey, how you doing?
Thank you, Dominic. everybody?
I think, oh, Harold speaking. I'm good. How you doing? You got 2 minutes, Ernesto. Okay. Uh-huh. That is correct. Yes, I think I actually specifically looking at a message board. Mhm. Uh-huh. Yeah. Okay. Mhm. All right. Very good. Okay. Very good. Thanks. All right. Take care. Bye-bye.
Good afternoon, Mr. Chair. We have a quorum.
Okay, thank you. I will call the meeting to order for the Mesilla Valley Metropolitan. Better? Let me take my mask off. Better? Call the meeting to order, the Mesilla Valley Metropolitan Planning Organization Technical Advisory Committee for March 3rd, 2022. First item is approval of the agenda. Any changes to the agenda?
No, Mr. Chair, we do not have any changes.
Next item is the approval of the minutes from January 6th.
Point of order, Mr. Chair. We'll need a motion for the agenda.
Oh, thank you. Is there a motion to approve the agenda?
Of the agenda?
Second.
Also, if people could state their names when they're speaking for the clerk.
Will do.
So it was David Armijo and Harold Love seconded.
All right, Mr. Chair, you can either do this by acclamation if you want, or we could do a roll call. It is your choice.
All in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? Approval of the minutes of January 6th, 2022. Any comments, changes? If not, is there a motion to approve the agenda, or the minutes, excuse me?
Motion to approve Renee Molina.
Second, Harold Love.
It's been moved and seconded. Can this be done by acclamation too?
Yes, Mr. Chair, it can.
Okay. All in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? Next item is public comment. Anybody from the public here to speak? Seeing none, we'll move on to the discussion items. First one is 5.1 NMDOT freight plan presentation.
And Mr. Chair, that'll be presented by Joe Moriarty from NMDOT.
Thank you.
Good afternoon. My name is Joe Moriarty. I'm the freight program planner for the New Mexico Department of Transportation. And I want to thank you for the opportunity to present our 2045 New Mexico Freight Plan. We've recently initiated the planning process, and this presentation is part of our ongoing outreach to MPOs and RTPOs around the state. There we go. So the 2045 New Mexico Freight Plan update will serve as our planning and programming framework for the future. All surface modes will be considered. That includes rail, truck, intermodal, truck to rail, rail to truck, truck to air and air to truck. And as best we can, we want to sort of peer into the future to see some of the future technologies and innovations that are sort of on the horizon, such as autonomous commercial vehicles, autonomous connected vehicles, and other emerging freight technologies. So why is this important? At every state, we're required to do a freight plan. We need to update this every 4 years. And we also have to comply with the new bipartisan infrastructure law. There's new requirements for freight planning that every state has to meet. So we have to have a compliant freight plan to access National Highway Freight Program funding. So to give you a little context, National Highway Freight Program funding, New Mexico is allocated between $13 to $15 million per year for freight planning projects. That may seem like a lot, but it really isn't, considering all our statewide needs in terms of the number of highway miles we have and the number of bridges we have. So what we want to do is use this planning document to be as strategic as possible in terms of our capital investments for freight planning. So here's sort of a summary of the tasks of the freight plan update process. The first item is actually we've reestablished the Freight Advisory Committee, and that committee is composed of freight industry representatives, carriers, shippers, logistic companies, as well as state, federal, and local governments, and other safety partners as well, and folks that are impacted by freight movements. So we've actually started some of the background technical work. We've hired a consulting team, High Street Consulting, and they're doing some background work on the sort of economic context. We're going to use the feedback from the Freight Advisory Committee, as well as the research that we're compiling right now to give us a strategic direction for the future. So who's involved? So we have a number of partners. Internally at the NMDOT, I'm leading the planning effort with my colleague and Rosa Kozub. She's the Bureau Chief for the Multimodal Planning and Programs Bureau. Like I mentioned before, we have High Street Consulting. We have the Freight Advisory Committee. We also are using the MPOs and RTPOs as a sounding board throughout the state. We also have an internal freight working group that is composed of internal NMDOT units, including the districts, our ITS department, et cetera. So here's the project timeline. As you can see, we started in the late fall. Research and analysis has been ongoing. We had our first Freight Advisory Committee meeting fairly recently, last week on February 24th. We had a really good turnout. Got a lot of really good input from the Freight Advisory Committee. We're going to take that and start beginning crafting the strategic direction. We're going to have a second Freight Advisory Committee sometime early summer, and a third one, Freight Advisory Committee, in the early fall. So the objective here is to have a compliant New Mexico freight plan in the sort of the November time period. So if you're at all interested, I welcome and encourage you to get in touch with me. I can put you on the distribution list. These outreach efforts are really an invitation to participate in our planning process, and you're more than welcome to call me or email me. We also have a really nice project website, the 2045 New Mexico Freight Plan.com. That's where we're posting our meeting notes, our lengthy presentation that we made to the Freight Advisory Committee, and other planning documents. So there's also a comment form, and you're welcome to register comments on our website. So that really concludes my presentation. It's really an invitation to participate in this process, and we welcome all participants. Thank you.
Thank you. Are there any questions from the committee? I just had a real quick question,
Sure.
if that's okay.
Sure. Yeah.
Mike Bartholomew. In the moving forward with freight in the state of New Mexico, is the kind of a lot like you mentioned that involves trucking as well too. Is this plan going to be possibly considering electric vehicle freight trucks and so forth?
Yes.
In the future?
Yeah, that's one of the technologies that.
Right. I was just wondering, if it's going to be like a highlight, knowing that it's such so many people's radars right now.
Right. And I think the consensus actually from the Freight Advisory Committee that's on the horizon, and
Right.
I'm assuming that electric trucks are going to be part of well into the future.
Right, and it'll have, of course, an implication for the infrastructure to.
Correct.
Yeah. Okay. Any other questions? Thank you.
Thank you so much.
We'll move on to the next discussion item, 5.2, the 2022 Annual Safety Report.
And Mr. Chair, that'll be presented by Dr. Michael McAdams.
Thank you.
Good afternoon, Technical Advisory Committee. I'm here again to talk about the safety report. Some things gotten worse, some things got better, and I'll go into detail on that. If you have no cars and no pedestrians and no bicyclists, you have no crashes, right? The complication comes and complexity comes when you have increasing vehicles, increasing pedestrians in conflict, trying to adapt to each other with the roadway themselves and also with other vehicles and pedestrians. In an automobile-oriented environment, passengers and bicycles are vulnerable, particularly now with the size of SUVs and trucks. Poor lighting also contributes as well. Crashes are directly related to the consequence of externalities related to the freedom of mobility enabled by motorized vehicles. Both crash and element or reduction are wicked problems. They're difficult to address and difficult to solve. Sometimes the solution causes other problems too. If you look at the rate of fatalities for the MPO, you will notice that it's very discouraging. It's still going up quite rapidly. We'll delve in a little bit of that. If you look at the analysis, you'll see that alcohol and drug abuse shoots to the top. And then also, if you look at lighting, that's also a factor. And unfortunately, pedestrians have been a significant portion of those fatalities. And if you look at this in a chart, you see right off the bat that alcohol and drug abuse is the overwhelming contributing factor for fatalities. Now, serious injuries continues to go down. That's no surprise. That's due to things like airbags, safer vehicles as far as metal in the car, and other factors that reduce serious injuries. If you look at what is, for all serious, what is it comes up top, all alcohol and drug abuse and distracted driving. And this is quite evident. Alcohol and drug abuse is still a contributing factor, but distracted driving is also a factor too, but not a very close behind second. Now, if you look at non-motor fatalities, unfortunately, they are going up too, with spikes every now and again, and we're predicting in the future they'll be about stable or stagnant. That's really not the direction we want to go in non-motor vehicles. Accidents. If you look at cause of crashes, but all the crashes included, driver attention, that's mainly due to texting while driving or talking while driving on cell phones. And then if you look at the overall, alcohol and drug abuse is way down. There is the overall contributing. The top intersections, no surprise here to a certain degree. We have Lowman and Tailshore. We have DeVise and Maine. We have Lowman and Walnut, and we have Delray further down, and West Baton Drive as well, or West Baton. And these-
Could I ask a question? What Class A, B, and C are?
Oh, Class A means the relationship is suspected. Class A means suspected injury. They actually, the police report that they haul them off the hospital or the emergency. Class B and C is like, we think there were injuries involved. There are different graduations of injuries. So Class A means we know, or to a certain degree, we know that there's been injury. And Class B and C is what we think there may have been. Yeah.
Thank you.
You're welcome. That was a good question. If you look at the intersections that have the most crashes, you see some of our favorites. There is some patterns, and there you look at along Loman from Walnut to all the way to Foothills, you'll see there's a great deal. But of course, the largest group crashes occurring at Tail Shore and Loman. There are also some along El Paseo, and you can see the one big at Del Rey and Intervise, and then another one at Baton Memorial. So I think often maps show things you don't see in just doing the list too. The top 3 corridors as far as crashes, no surprise, Tail Shore, El Paseo, et cetera, and these come quite clear when you look at the map too. So you see, you combine all these crashes, all the intersection and then mid-block crashes. Tail Shore comes at really high, and then also Foothills. Then you see the North Main corridor from Three Crosses to Del Rey, and then you'll see also Missouri and University and somewhat El Paseo as well. So these are the usual culprits for crashes. They occur every time. Both the intersections and the corridors always show up high. Now, if you look at pedestrian crashes, they're not quite as clearly defined. They're all over. They pretty much from year to year change courses. And you'll notice Tail Shore, there's quite a bit there. There's more, some in the center. There's more in the university because of heavy traffic of pedestrians. And then usually several along at the Amador near the Community of Hope and Gospel Rescue Mission. And usually Picacho is a good candidate too. But they change, but usually can always count on Picacho, Amador, West Amador, University, and somewhat lately Tail Shore. Bicycle crashes, again, they're mostly in the center, and that's no coincidence. That's where a lot of bicyclists are biking to the university, and there's a fairly heavily trafficked corridors too. There's fatalities, one at Motel and Amador, and then another one Solano. And so pedestrians are most vulnerable, and unfortunately, some of them could have been prevented. A lot of the pedestrian crashes, fatalities are mid-block, not at intersections. Now, if you look at key findings, drug and alcohol abuse are the primary cause of fatal crashes. Driver attention, presumably related to cell phone and distracted driving, are the chief causes of all crashes. Pedestrian fatalities represent almost half, 40%, of all fatalities. A significant number of pedestrian crashes occur at night, dark or dusk or twilight. And the intersections which deserve attention are some of the regulars: Loman and Tail Shore, Elks in North Main, El Paseo and Bounce, and Loman and Walton. Studies where corridor studies may be warranted at Tail Shore from Loman to Northrise, El Paseo from North Main to University, East Loman from Solano to Foothills, North Main from Solano to I-25, and East University Avenue. If you look at, in conclusion, crashes occur for multiple reasons and can be viewed as both structural, meaning alcohol and drug abuse, overall factors, and by location, or geometric, or other location-related intersection of corridors. Although separating this both the structural and the geometric causes, where crashes are intertwined. Both must be addressed to reduce the number and severity of crashes within the Mesilla Valley planning area. Lighting intersection corridors appear to be a major factor in both pedestrians and bicycle crashes. This is also, a lot of the stuff is supported by national data as well. So it's just not here. Lack of separation, speed, and protection at intersections are also contributing factors for the pedestrian population. And one thing we remember, there is not a silver bullet. There is not one solution to decrease crashes in the MPO planning area. Some are beyond our control, absolutely. They need to be addressed at the national or the state level as far as alcohol and drug abuse, distracted driving, and both of those are very hard to get a handle on. Jurisdictions of the planning area must continue to strive to reduce crashes and the severity despite the complexity and the nature of crashes. And I stand for any questions or comments.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Any questions from the committee? Oh, I always have questions. I can
Good,
ask one,
thank
Mike Bartholomew. I had a question with collisions that involve rail. Are they included in these statistics?
They are, but they haven't been particularly, we can get them for the records, but I didn't point them out in that aspect. I know there was a recent fatality along the railroad, yeah, I guess last week. Yeah.
I was just curious.
Yes.
And with these safety reports, ultimately, how should they be used in the planning? Are they used for prioritizing some of these intersections or dangerous areas for funding to get fixed?
I think they could be used for a planning guide to look into what can anything be done. In some situations, there may be right-of-way problems, et cetera, but they bring them to the forefront of intersection corridors that are worthy of further study. And really, you have to look at some of the causes, the direct diagrams, et cetera, and the details to really look at solutions for these intersection corridors geometrically.
And I guess my final comment, I was noticing that on a lot of the graphs that 2020, 21, and 22 were all pretty much projections. So I'm assuming we're still making projections on data that's a couple years old.
We are, and that's one thing we're trying to change. And that's one of the problems we have is that often they've been changed later that will solve or address some of the problems for crashes. But we always do with a 2-year lag, and we're trying to improve that. But that's one of our biggest complaints in this area.
Okay. I think I hogged all the questions. Any other committee members? Thank you, Michael.
Thank you.
Next item, 5.3, the MPO bylaws revision process discussion.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. This is Andrew Ray for the record. With the approval by the state of New Mexico of the Mesilla Valley MPO's new JPA, the next order of business is to, which actually I don't remember if I had the opportunity to announce that to this committee. I think that I did, but I just did if I hadn't. The next order of business is to work on the MPO bylaws. Not only to make some revisions in the bylaws to reflect the altered provisions of the JPA, but also to make some changes that staff believes are necessary for the smooth operation of the MPO, and also to start doing some future proofing of the MPO in anticipation of potential achieving of TMA status in the 2030 census. So we did present to the policy board. They're the policy board now, no longer the policy committee. We did present to the policy board on this topic in February, and they directed staff that their preferred means of dealing with this topic is going to be the establishment of a subcommittee to work on the draft of the bylaws, which will then be presented through the committee process for ultimate adoption by the policy board. The alternative that the board directed me to specifically write the resolution for will call for 2 representatives from the Technical Advisory Committee to be appointed. Those representatives were informally selected as being the chair and vice chair of this committee, but per Robert's Rules of Order, individuals for a subcommittee do have to be specifically designated in the resolution. So I will be, per the guidance of the policy board, I will be putting in Mr. Bartholomew and Ms. Ainsworth as the representatives of the TAC in their capacity of chair and vice chair. I have already reached out to both of them already, and they both indicated that they would be willing to serve in this capacity for this particular process. All that being said, though, the policy board did want me to be very clear with the TAC to please feel free to engage and ask questions during this process. Probably the most effective way of doing so would either be contact myself or speak with Mr. Bartholomew or Ms. Ainsworth. At this point in time, the policy board does not meet in March, so the subcommittee, I expect that it will be selected and officially designated at the April policy board meeting, and then we'll start meeting as soon as I can possibly get everybody together after that. I do hope that this will be a relatively smooth process. My aim right now is hopefully we'll have one meeting where we go over staff's proposed revisions and come to consensus at that, and then have a subsequent meeting after we have composed the draft for the subcommittee to sign off on, and then start bringing it through the committee process. So does anybody have any questions?
Any questions? Harold?
Just curious, what's the population threshold to reach TMA status?
200,000.
200,000?
So we've still got a ways to go. It's unlikely, in my opinion, that we will hit that in the 2030 census. But if we have another big spike at the end like we did pre-2020, it's possible. It's possible.
Any other questions? I have one, Mike Bartholomew. Are these subcommittees, is the focus on the bylaws going to be, are we going to be looking at all of the bylaws, or just those pertaining to our committee primarily?
We are going to bring forward a comprehensive rewrite for discussion. I guess just to elaborate a little more, the purpose of bringing representatives from the TAC and the BPAC into the subcommittee is because it is going to be comprehensive. It's going to rewrite the rules for all of the committees. And so staff argued to the policy board that it was necessary to have voices of those committees on the subcommittee, and the policy board agreed. So that's why we're bringing representatives from all the committees together.
Thank you. Any other questions? Seeing none, I'll move on to the next item. It's MPO 101 presentation.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I'll introduce Mr. Dominic Loya, who'll give this presentation.
Good afternoon again. So we'll be going through the MPO 101 presentation here. So just in general, the MPO was federally mandated for planning areas, metropolitan areas with population over 50,000. There are 5 within the state of New Mexico. There's the El Paso MPO, Farmington, Mesilla Valley, Mid-Region, and Santa Fe. El Paso and Mid-Region are transportation management areas, or TMAs. They have over 200,000 people in population. So small MPOs here, such as Mesilla Valley, are done by joint powers agreements. As we said this year, we got a new one actually approved. So they specify the terms of cooperation and the roles of the MPO and staff in the transportation planning area. They also outline the financial responsibilities of each of the members' jurisdictions. And then federal law will gives much more definition to TMAs. So we are required to have bylaws, as Mr. Ray just discussed, that we will have to redo now that we have a new JPA. And then we also have a 3-year cooperative agreement within MDOT, which again, that is also up this year, so that will be renegotiated this year. And then we generally interact with the staff interacts with the NMDOT liaison for most issues related to NMDOT or FHWA. We do have a number of work products we are responsible for. And that includes the public participation plan, which is every 5 years in conjunction with the MTP. So we will be bringing that next year. There's the Title VI plan, which is now every 3 years. We just did the Title VI plan last year. Then we have the Unified Planning Work Program, which is every 2 years. That'll be one that will be brought forward again this year. We have the Transportation Improvement Program, or the TIP, which is updated quarterly, and we have a call for projects every 2 years, and we just went through a call for projects last year, and the new TIP began on October 1st. And then we have the Metropolitan Transportation Plan, which is every 5 years. And as I said, with the kickoff of the Public Participation Plan next year, that will also kick off the MTP update. And then every year we have the annual listing of obligated projects, and then the annual performance expenditure report. So going into some of these, the Public Participation Plan defines how we will conduct public involvement activities. There's a federal regulation on this, so we do have to follow the federal process. It has to be accessible and equitable to all impacted and interested parties. It must also be predictable. It has to be, as I said, updated before each MTP process, and it will be in 2023. So the Title VI plan is off the Civil Rights Act of 1964. It assures the U.S. Department of Transportation that persons are not excluded from the planning process. It also includes a complaint process for potential Title VI violations, and it has to be updated every 3 years. Then we have the Unified Planning Work Program. This is a biannual document that outlines all the transportation planning activities. It's basically day-to-day operations of the MPO. It must be consistent with the MTP. In general, a lot of the stuff that you will see come through here are the call for projects at the federal level, the Recreational Trails Program, the Transportation Alternatives Program, and Congestion Mitigation and Air Quality. And then on the state level, it's the Transportation Project Fund, which we do have an open call for projects right now. So, and just some of the things we've gotten before, we have the Recreational Trails Program. I believe the Las Cruces Lateral is actually under that. We have the Transportation Alternatives Program, which the Walnut Street Improvement Project, Elks Drive Trail Project, and the Safe Routes to School Coordinator are all funded under. And this year we have an actual application for congestion mitigation and air quality. The state, we have the Transportation Project Fund. The one project that has been done and was funded and completed was La Llorona Trail Extension. And the current UPWP went into effect on October 1st of 2020, and the next one will have to go into effect on October 1st of 2022. And then we now have the TIP, the Transportation Improvement Program. It's federally funded, regionally significant projects within the MPO area. Completed projects, and MDOT just completed the University I-25 interchange this year. Valley Drive was completed a few years ago from Picacho to Avenida de Mesilla. And then there's the ongoing projects such as US Highway 70 maintenance. Any type of maintenance projects will be seen in this. I-25 corridor study, which is also ongoing. And then the Elks Drive Trail will also kicking off later this year. And in it, we also have the future projects. So next year's University Avenue Multimodal Project, of course, the Roadrunner Transit Maintenance Operations Center, Dripping Springs Roadway Improvements, US 70 Rehabilitation, the next phase, which would be from Camino Real to Lenox. And then we have future projects will be things like the Arrowhead interchange, I-10 bridge replacements, Mesa Grande, and of course, complete rehabilitation of I-10. The current TIP went in last year on October 1st of 2021. The MTP is the Metropolitan Transportation Plan. It's the long-range plan for the MPO region covering a minimum of 20 years. It's federally required. It has to be consistent with federal transportation law and cite applicable sections. Has to identify facilities that function as an integrated transportation network, emphasizing those facilities that serve national and regional transportation functions. It considers the 10 planning factors as they're related to the 20-year planning horizon and describes performance measures, performance targets that are used in the MTP to assess the transportation system. So the system performance reporting evaluation condition performance of the transportation system with respect to the performance targets, as we do every year with the safety targets. They're basically one of those, and then the other one is the state of good repair, which is every 2 years, which we'll be seeing again this year. It's to incorporate strategies also to improve performance of existing transportation facilities, to relieve congestion, maximize safety and mobility of people and goods, as well as enhance both transportation and transit, and incorporate the financial plan to determine how the MTP can be implemented, also to find the necessary funding sources to carry out projects and recommend additional financial strategies to support project implementation. So the included financial strategies dedicated to maintaining not only the existing infrastructure, but also projected future infrastructure. It's also to examine implementation of environmental mitigation activities. Scenario planning is part of it, but it is not required by federal law, but is strongly encouraged by both FHWA, the Federal Highway Administration, and NMDOT. It also includes stuff from Federal Transit Administration and transit planning for the future. And it also encourages MPOs, the federal government encourages MPOs to address emerging issues, electronic vehicles, things like that, driverless vehicles, or things like that will be included in this. The currently adopted one was adopted last year on July 15th of 2020, and it will need to be updated before June of 2025. So what is the Technical Advisory Committee's role in this? It's basically to provide tip review from a technical analysis standpoint, UPWP review, and professional advice on projects when they're brought forward. We also have an MPO 101 book that usually everybody receives as soon as they become a member. Any of the documents in there can be updated at any time. We have no problem doing it because some of the people have had their books for a while now. And like I said, we're happy to provide it, and I will now stand for questions.
Any questions for Mr. Loya? With the, you were mentioning about the handbooks and everything, is it possible at some point like to digitize those in your website, that just that way they'd be always updated and easy to access?
So we do have a digital copy we can send out, but we usually do not keep those on the website just because of the changing things such as committee members, things like that.
Right, but yeah, we would all have access to that, so yeah. And I know we've had discussions, Andrew, about updating the long-range transit plan. Is that probably going to be something that's incorporated into the MTP planning process, or would that be something separate?
Mr. Chair, this is Andrew Ray. For the record, we would need to discuss that at MTP time as to what the prospects for that were going to be.
Okay. Any other questions? That said, I guess we're moving on to staff and committee comments. Start with the committee comments. City of Las Cruces.
This is Cotin Lee. I have an update on the bike and pedestrian infrastructure improvement at Madrid and Walnut. We'll have the bid opening on March 31st, and we should see begin construction sometime end of April. And Hector, I believe you have another one to update.
Hector Terrazas, Mr. Chair, for the record. The city is finalizing, or the contract is finalizing a road diet along Alameda between Picacho and Amador, and they should be done with all the markings by tomorrow morning.
Mr. Chair, I also wanted to ask City of Las Cruces staff about, I saw in the city council packet that the city's putting in for a map project on Del Rey and Baton Memorial. Just curious what the, I guess, specific outcome from that was going to be.
Mr. Chair, Mr. Andrew, the outcome or what the actual map grant is?
Well, I guess the intended goal of the, if the city gets the funding.
The funding is going to be focusing on improving the intersection specifically at Baton West and Del Rey. There's a legacy signal that needs some improvements because we have a double left there. Make some minor changes there. Most of the project's going to be focused on improving signal timing. So we're going to be installing infrastructure, which is fiber, between the signal at Baton East and the signal at Del Rey and Telshore. And that will alleviate traffic in that area.
Thank you.
Town of Mesilla, Doña Ana County. Didn't want to skip them.
Renee Molina for Doña Ana County Engineering. No comments, no projects, updates. Thanks.
Okay. Town of Mesilla, are they here? Las Cruces Public Schools. Roadrunner Transit. Well, the good news is we had really good news yesterday. We were notified by Senator Heinrich's office that our application for additional ARP funding for operations was approved in the full amount we requested for, $6.2 million. That'll carry us pretty much through our fiscal year 23. So we were very, very pleased to get that. That'll allow us to use some of our other funding for some of our other formula funds for other projects that we're a little short on, and that'll really, really be helpful in that sense. The design of the buses are for our electric buses is all completed. We completed the contract last December, but all the design and agreement what's going into it was just finished up. So we're anticipating the electric buses to arrive in about a year from now. And as far as our maintenance and operations facility out near the city's joint utilities, the city will be going out for bid for the construction of that. They've already contracted with a construction manager for this particular project. Once the bid is awarded, we're told it'll be about 16 months for completion, but there will be a priority on the charging infrastructure for the electric buses. So they assure us that it will be in place by the time that our electric buses arrive. And with that, I think that's most of my comments. Any questions? Next is South Central Regional Transit District.
Yes, David Armijo for South Central. I just want to report that after a couple years of working through the local politics, for the first time in 8 years, the Southern New Mexico would actually start receiving urban funds, 5307 funding from the city of El Paso. So congratulations to us. Unfortunately, since we don't have a U.S. budget, all we have is a partial. So the first allotment would be $204,000 of funds, but when you go from 0 to $204,000, that sounds like a lot of money for us. So we're happy with that. We expect to get about $600,000 a year. Unfortunately, we're being blocked by Sun Metro on our 5339 urban funds for bus capital. And so we're going to have to work with our senators and governor on that one. That's probably going to take us another year or two. It is unfortunately, and I think throwing back to the bylaws and discussions of what goes forward, one of the things I've noticed since I've been back in this region the last 6 years is that it's very difficult to change the pace of how things were going. The fact that Sun Metro was able to take the funds from Sunland Park and Anthony and Chaparral for 8 years in Doña Ana County is, quite frankly, a little bit of a crime, and I'll put that on the record. I'm okay with that. I'm near the end of my days of retirement. The bottom line is we're moving in the right direction. So I hope with whatever comes of the bylaws and the process going forward, the work between the MPOs is very important. I will say this, the El Paso MPO was very helpful to us once we got the process moving forward. So we're looking forward to seeing more funds. And over the next 10 years, it's about $6 million. Not as much as you're getting this next year, but we'll take it. Baby steps. The other aspect of this is that we're actually going to end up with El Paso County picking up $1 million a year from the region because they qualify for those same funds in that area, and that's a big difference. So I think what will ultimately happen is I also understand as a part of the MPO, they're not properly reporting the ridership. So at the end of the day, we may end up getting more revenues and ridership overall for the region. And I think that's what the MPO is all about. And I think that's what we're trying to do here as well. So I think that's good. And I wish you all well in the next step in the bylaws. It's going to be fun because I'm working the same thing right now with my people. So that's the end of my report. Thank you.
Thank you. NMDOT project updates.
Harold Love, New Mexico Department of Transportation. Got a couple of projects to report on. I-10, mile marker 116 to 139. Our maintenance forces continue fog sealing the interstate. Eastbound has been completed, so we're finishing up westbound. Also, where's it at? We got a new project that's just getting started. I-25 mile marker 14 to the 24, just north of Las Cruces. Going to begin roadway reconstruction, basically milling off the existing surface and placing new asphalt along with some guardrail upgrades. And, that's it.
Thank you. Any questions for that? And finally, MPO staff updates.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I am very pleased to finally be able to introduce to you Ms. Katerina Provenghi. She is the new Associate Transportation Planner here on board with MPO staff. She was a co-op with us last year, so we're very excited to be able to extend her full-time employment. We did have to kind of go through a hard road to get her with us, so we're very happy to have her. And we actually are currently, as of this moment, fully staffed. We have our full complement of FTEs, and we have both of the co-ops that we were supposed to have. So this is a glorious moment. I don't anticipate that it's going to last very long. In fact, I know for a fact that at the very latest, it's going to last only until May, but still I'm enjoying it while I have it. And I believe that's the only update that I have from staff today.
Okay. And I wanted to, Andrew and his staff are actually going to be doing an MPO 101 for more transit-specific MPO 101 for us in a later this month. And I'm really thankful, appreciative that they're going to do that. We find that working within city governments, and we have to rely on so many other departments and everything for grant management, accounting, purchasing, and all of this kind of stuff. And they just, especially things that involve the budgeting process and how we have to have the planning process align with the city's budgeting process. So that's going to be really helpful, I think, for especially our grants, the city grants staff. And I'm very appreciative you provide those kinds of training. Any public comment? Seeing none, is there a motion to adjourn?
So move, Harold Love.
Second?
Second, Renee Molina.
It's been moved and seconded. All in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Thank you.